At Thanksgiving, Aunt scoffed, "You're too sensitive," then blinked when the therapist called my reaction normal. I watched her face in real time on the shaky little Zoom window, my phone balanced against a stack of board games in the spare room. Aunt Karen stood in the doorway with her arms crossed over her floral blouse, cheeks flushed from wine and oven heat, smirk ready. On my screen, my therapist, Dr. Patel, had just heard the whole thing through my AirPods until they popped out when Karen pushed the door open. Now his voice came through the phone speaker, calm and steady. "Actually," he said, eyes flicking from me to the new figure in the background, "what you're feeling makes a lot of sense given what you've described about your family dynamics." Karen's smirk faltered, just a little. It was such a small thing. A blink, a brief tightening around her mouth. But it was the first crack I'd ever seen in her absolute certainty that I was overreacting. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My hands were shaking, half from being ambushed and half from the surrealness of having my therapist and my aunt in the same conversation, on the worst holiday of the year. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear the clatter of cutlery and my mom calling for more gravy like nothing unusual was happening. It was a weird setup from the start. Dr. Patel and I had planned this 10-minute check-in call weeks earlier because Thanksgiving has always been a lot for me. He calls it a high-risk environment for my nervous system. I call it hell with yams. We agreed that if I was going to go this year, first time in 2 years, we'd build in an escape valve. I could step away, text him, and if he was free, we'd hop on a quick grounding call so I didn't just dissociate in the bathroom for an hour like usual. My family didn't know the details. Mom knew I had therapy on Thursdays, but the idea that I'd schedule it around them, that I'd prepare emotionally for being in their presence, that would have sent them open-mouthed into a whole new orbit. So I didn't say anything. I just told Mom I might need a little quiet time in the afternoon to take a call for work. She'd waved me off, distracted by stuffing. "Whatever, as long as you're here," she said. "I'm 29 now. The last time I'd been at a big family Thanksgiving, I was 26 and still deep in the maybe it was all in my head phase. Back then, every comment about being dramatic or sensitive or the quiet one sunk its hooks deeper. I'd drive home with my jaw clenched and chest tight and tell myself, "They're not that bad, you're just weak." Cut to a few panic attacks, insomnia, and crying in a bathroom stall at work after my boss raised his voice. And suddenly my GP is handing me referrals for therapy. It took 3 sessions with Dr. Patel before I was willing to say the word trauma out loud without wanting to apologize to someone. It took 6 before I stopped prefacing every memory with, "It wasn't that bad." But it took 10 before I could look him in the eye, well, camera, and say, "My family makes me feel unsafe," and not immediately follow it with, "I mean, they fed me and clothed me, so it's fine." He never once said, "Your parents are monsters," or slapped a big label on them. He just kept reflecting things back to me like, "When you were 8 and your aunt called you pathetic for crying, what did you need in that moment?" And it makes sense your brain learned to go numb in loud, unpredictable environments. That was more jarring than if he'd just declared them evil. It made their little jokes look like more than harmless teasing. Thanksgiving has always been the Olympics of those jokes. The whole extended family in one house, everyone stressed, the wine flowing. It turns my relatives into a panel of judges scoring everyone's life. This year, I told myself it'd be different because I'd be different. I've spent a year in therapy. I've learned about boundaries and triggers and how to actually feel my feelings instead of swallowing them like pills. Dr. Patel and I made a plan. Drive myself so I can leave when I want. No conversations about my weight, job, or relationship status. If someone starts, I say, "I'm not discussing that today," and physically walk away if they keep going. If things feel overwhelming, go to the spare room, text him, and we ground for 10 minutes. No just pushing through while my body screams. On paper, it seemed manageable. In reality, walking up my parents' driveway with a pumpkin pie and my heart tap dancing in my throat, I felt like I was 9 again, walking on invisible eggshells. The first hour actually went okay. Mom hugged me a bit too tightly and whispered, "I'm so glad you came, sweetheart," with that desperate edge that makes me feel like a hostage, but she didn't comment on my weight. Dad gave me a clap on the shoulder instead of a stiff half-hug and immediately asked about my job in software something. It's UX design, but close enough. Aunt Karen arrived in a gust of perfume and faux fur, kissing everyone loudly and talking over whoever was mid-sentence. There were the usual microjabs. "Still single, huh?" from Karen before the coat was fully off. "At least you have your career," she added, like a consolation prize. I remembered my script and said, "I'm not talking about my love life today," then turned to help Mom in the kitchen. My cheeks burned, but I didn't dissolve or apologize. Tiny victory. The real blow-up started over, of all things, the seating chart. Mom had scribbled names on sticky notes and placed them around the long folding table in the dining room. I noticed mine next to Karen's and opposite my cousin, who loves to bring up politics like it's a game. My chest tightened. "Hey, Mom?" I said quietly, holding up my little Harper sticky note. "Any chance I could sit a couple of seats away from Karen?" Mom looked up from the gravy with a harried expression. "What? Why?" I swallowed. The part of me that hates being seen as difficult started panicking. I get overwhelmed," I said, feeling my face heat. "It'd be easier for me if I wasn't right next to her. She likes to joke a lot, and I'm trying to lower my stress." Mom sighed dramatically. "It's always something with you now," she muttered. Fine, sit wherever. Just don't start a fight." "I'm not trying to start a fight," I said, but she'd already turned back to the stove. I took my sticky note and quietly swapped it with the empty seat at the far end, near my quieter cousin and the kids' table. I thought that was that. Apparently not. By the time everyone sat down, Karen had noticed. She plopped into the chair where my name used to be and looked down the table at me. "Oh," she said loudly. "Am I too much for you now, Miss Mental Health?" A couple of people chuckled nervously. My stomach dropped. My cousin glanced at me, eyebrows raised in a silent "Are you okay?" "I just wanted a calmer spot," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I get overstimulated easily." Karen snorted. "Oh, please. We all grew up in the same house and turned out fine. You're just too sensitive." She stabbed her knife into the turkey like a visual aid. "Back in my day, if we started whining like that, your dad would have given us something to cry about." The table laughed more wholeheartedly at that. Old war stories. Classic parenting. My face went cold. My ears rang. I felt my throat close the way it always does when someone drops that line. Something to cry about. Like a trapdoor back to every time I got smacked for being upset about something. For a second, the room blurred at the edges. "I'm not being sensitive," I heard myself say, even though my body was screaming danger. "Danger. Shut up. I'm just telling you what I need." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And does your therapist tell you to make everyone rearrange their lives around your needs now?" "Karen," my mom said weakly, "just leave it." "No, I want to hear this," Karen insisted, turning that bright, cruel curiosity on me. "Go on, Harper. Analyze us. Tell us how messed up we are. You always were dramatic." My hands started tingling. Classic panic symptom. I grabbed my water and took a gulp, but it sloshed onto my dress. My brain could feel itself starting to float, that familiar dissociation creeping in, where everything gets heavy and far away. This is where, historically, I'd smile tightly, say it's fine, change the subject, and then spend the rest of the night numb. Instead, a tiny voice that sounded suspiciously like Dr. Patel's piped up in my head. "You are allowed to leave situations that feel unsafe. You don't have to argue, you can just step away." So I set my fork down. "I'm gonna take a quick break," I said, my chair scraping louder than I meant it to. My legs felt weirdly light as I walked down the hall to the spare room. I could feel eyes on my back, that familiar "you're being rude" heat on my shoulders, but I forced my feet to keep going. I shut the spare room door, leaned my forehead against it for a second, then pulled out my phone. My hands shook as I texted Dr. Patel. "Hey, is now okay?" 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Yes. Call when ready." I sat on the edge of the old pull-out sofa, propped my phone against a stack of dusty board games, and hit the video call button. Seeing his face appear, calm, neutral background, that slightly crooked plant he never straightens, made my throat ache. "How's it going?" he asked gently. I let out a shaky laugh. "I lasted an hour and a half." "That's longer than last time," he pointed out. "What happened?" I started to explain. The seating chart, the comment, the too sensitive jab, how my body had reacted like someone had pulled an alarm. Saying it out loud to someone who listens without rolling their eyes already started to untangle the knot in my chest. "And then I left the table," I finished. "I feel like I made a scene just by walking away, but I couldn't breathe." "It makes sense," he said. "From what you've told me about being punished for expressing emotions as a child, your system associates those comments with danger. Walking away when you're overwhelmed isn't making a scene, it's regulating your nervous system." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I hate that I still react like this. Karen always says I'm overreacting." Right on cue, the door to the spare room swung open. I jerked around. Aunt Karen stood there, hands still on the knob, eyebrows raised. "Aha," she said, like she'd caught me doing something scandalous. "I knew you weren't on a work call." My heart slammed into my ribs. I scrambled to grab my phone, but she'd already stepped fully into the room, arms crossed. From her angle, she could see the screen, Dr. Patel's face, my blotchy one in the corner. "What, you running to your shrink the second someone hurts your feelings?" she demanded. "You really are addicted to drama." For a second, I froze. The old urge to apologize, to hide, to stuff the phone under a cushion and pretend it was nothing, nearly overwhelmed me. Then I heard Dr. Patel's voice, strangely steady from the little speaker. "Hi," he said. "I'm Dr. Patel. We were just talking about that interaction." Karen blinked, thrown off for half a second. Well. She smoothed her blouse. "You must be busy, doctor. We're in the middle of Thanksgiving here." "Yes," he said. "I understand this is a family gathering." Harper stepped away because she was feeling overwhelmed, which is a very normal reaction when someone dismisses your feelings. Karen's eyes snapped to me. "See?" she said, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You tell strangers our business and then they think they know everything." "He's not a stranger," I said, my voice small but there. "I'm not making any moral judgment about your family," Dr. Patel said, still calm. "I'm simply saying it's understandable for Harper to feel hurt when her emotional experience is minimized." "Minimized?" Karen repeated like he'd spoken in Greek. "When you say she's too sensitive for expressing a need," he explained, "you're implying her reaction is wrong rather than trying to understand it. That can be invalidating, especially given her history." Karen's cheeks went a deeper shade of pink. She looked like someone had dumped a bucket of cold water on her. I watched her eyes flick between the screen and me, trying to compute that my therapist wasn't immediately siding with her. "That's just how we talk in this family," she said finally. "We tease. She knows that." I swallowed. "I don't," I said. My throat burned, but I pushed the words out. "It doesn't feel like teasing to me. It feels like you're telling me there's something wrong with me for needing what I need." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, there was no quick comeback. She looked, not guilty exactly but disoriented, like someone had moved the furniture in a room she thought she knew by heart. "Anyway," she said stiffly, backing toward the door, "I'll let you get back to your session." Her voice snagged a little on the last word. She left, shutting the door more gently than she'd opened it. I stared after her, my whole body shaking. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God. I can't believe that just happened." "That was a lot," Dr. Patel said. "How are you feeling right now?" I let out a weird, hysterical laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. "Like I was just stripped naked at the dinner table," I said. "But also like I wasn't crazy? Did that sound crazy?" He shook his head. "No. It sounded like a very reasonable reaction. Given what you've shared over the past year, that comment would have been extremely activating. You removed yourself, reached out for support, and communicated your feelings. That's healthy. Healthy. Not dramatic. Not ungrateful. Not too sensitive. Healthy. We spent the rest of the 10 minutes doing breathing exercises, grounding, naming 5 things I could see in the room: ugly floral curtains, a dusty treadmill, a painting of a boat, cracked window frame, a stack of old VHS tapes. For things I could feel: the scratchy sofa fabric, my own sweater sleeves, the hard edge of my phone, my feet in my shoes, and so on. By the time we hung up, my heart rate had slowed from hummingbird to slightly panicked squirrel. Progress. I didn't go back to the table right away. I sat there, staring at the door, listening for raised voices. Nothing. Just the murmur of conversation and the clink of cutlery. Life going on as if that little earthquake hadn't happened. Eventually, I went back. Mom glanced up from passing the rolls, a question flickering in her eyes, then smoothing over into hostess mode. Karen studiously avoided looking at me. The kids were arguing about who got the last crescent roll. I slid into the seat at the end of the table, next to my quiet cousin. My plate was still there, food cooling. "You okay?" my cousin whispered. "I think so," I whispered back. And for once, I wasn't entirely lying. The rest of the meal wasn't magically peaceful. Dad made a snide comment about everyone needing a therapist these days, and I felt my jaw clench. Karen was noticeably quieter, but threw in the occasional. "Back in our day, we just dealt with it. I didn't rise to it. I focused on my breathing, on tasting my food, on making silly faces at my smallest cousin across the table." At one point, Mom leaned over while people were distracted with dessert and muttered, "Next time, don't bring your doctor into family stuff. It's embarrassing." I felt that familiar shame surge, then ebb as I remembered Dr. Patel's words. "I didn't bring him into it," I said softly. "You all barged into my coping. I'm allowed to have support." She frowned, like I'd spoken nonsense, then turned away to refill the whipped cream. When it was finally over and I was back in my car, the quiet of the interior felt like stepping into a church. I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, not turning the key, just breathing. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "I didn't mean to upset you. You know I'm just joking. Don't make everything into a therapy thing." I stared at it for a long time. Old me would have replied, "It's okay. I'm sorry for overreacting. Just to smooth things over." This new, shaky version of me, the one who has a therapist's voice in her ear and a sense that my feelings are allowed to exist, did something different. "I know you like to joke," I wrote back, "but those comments hurt me. My reaction is normal. I'm working on taking care of myself." I watched the typing bubbles appear, disappear, then nothing. Maybe she'd fire back later. Maybe she'd screenshot it to the family group chat. Maybe the story at future reunions will be, "Remember the year Harper called in her therapist at Thanksgiving?" I can't control that. That sucks, but it's also freeing in a way. For so long, my whole personality was built around not making anyone uncomfortable. Be easy. Be agreeable. Be quiet. If something hurts, laugh it off. If someone calls you too sensitive, believe them. Hearing an actual mental health professional say, in front of one of my worst critics, "Your reaction is normal," cracked something wide open in me. It wasn't that I suddenly saw my family as villains in a movie. They're just people with their own scars and denial and bad coping mechanisms. But for the first time, I had a neutral witness. Someone who isn't tied up in our history, who can say, "Hey, when someone pokes your old wounds and you flinch, that's not weakness. That's a nervous system doing its job." I don't know what my relationship with my family will look like going forward. I'm not planning a dramatic no-contact announcement or posting their names on the internet. I still love them in that tangled, painful way you love the people who raised you. But something shifted at that table and in that spare room and in me. At Thanksgiving, Aunt scoffed, "You're too sensitive," then blinked when the therapist called my reaction normal. She'll probably tell the story differently. How I ran off to cry to a stranger, how no one can joke anymore, How kids these days are fragile. That's fine. She can have her version. This is mine. I was hurt. I said so. I got support, and someone who actually understands this stuff said, "You're not crazy." For the first time in a long time, I believe him more than I believe her. And that, honestly, feels like the beginning of something I don't have a word for yet, but I think it might be called healing.